I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Okay, today on Pro Mindset, we have Brandon Averill. Brandon, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Craig. Really looking forward to being here.
Okay, so Brandon, let's make the connection here. You know, your brother Erik was on the Pro Mindset show a few weeks ago. And you're the big brother. What's it like to have two professional athletes in the same family? And what was the dynamic of you being the big brother? Were you the guy that showed him the way? Did he end up being better than you? Kind of describe to the audience just the family dynamics of having two pros in the same family.
Sure. I mean, it was definitely a lot of fun, as you can imagine, competitive. You know, I can't believe I'm going to say this on air, but he was far more talented than I was. But he also, I think, cheated because he was left-handed. So that definitely played in his favor. But, yeah, we were competitive. I mean, we were fortunate that we got to play together in high school for a couple of years, won the CIF championship together. So kind of started off with a lot of fun memories. And then, obviously, you know, we went our separate ways for college, but had the opportunity to face each other a couple times there, which are some good stories that maybe we can then get into. But I would say at the end of the day, you know, it was a lot of driving each other. You know, I'd like to say I had a good influence on him. He certainly had more talent. There's no doubt about that.
Well, when you and your father tied his right hand behind his back, so he had to throw with his left hand, that's probably what did it.
Yeah, you're probably right there. That's he definitely had the leg up.
So why don't you share for everyone, you know, your story. You're in the financial world today, and, you know, you played baseball at UCLA, you went to the minors and that whole thing, but just kind of walk everybody through your story.
I'd be happy to do that. I mean, my story, grew up in Southern California, you know, great family. Our dad played college baseball at University of Redlands, so, you know, baseball was in our blood. You know, our family vacations growing up were going to visit different ballparks and different things like that. So it was a lot of fun growing up there, and then had the opportunity to go to UCLA and play there. Spent 4 great years there, made a lot of great relationships, had some good times, you know, able to gain the respect of my teammates and be the captain by the time I left there. So just a really good path to be on. You know, I know we were visiting a little bit before this and started to tell the story of how in the world did I end up at UCLA close to home, and then, you know, here comes the more talented younger brother and he ends up at ASU. And I think, you know, the story goes, and the funny part about this was it was actually, you know, after I left UCLA, I was playing pro ball, and he's pitching in the College World Series for Arizona State. And this is a story that had been between him and I, but he decided he was going to out me on national television. And they asked him this question, and it was, you know, story goes, I'm sitting there, I didn't even know he had revealed it, and I'm sitting in the hotel with my teammates watching, and he proceeds to tell them, hey, yeah, you know, basically the reason I ended up at Arizona State was because I asked Brandon, should I take that trip or should I come to UCLA? And he just said no. And it was the advice I did give him. You know, I knew he was a better fit at ASU, and he was going to get that opportunity to pitch in the College World Series. But, you know, I think just as an older brother, yes, I would have loved to have played with him, but, you know, I just knew that was going to be a better fit for him. But when he outed me on national TV, you can imagine my phone just started blowing up with teammates, and everybody else couldn't believe that, you know, I was kind of the turncoat there, and ended up getting him to a rival school.
Well, let's talk about the rivalry. You know, you're at UCLA, he's at ASU. You guys are obviously in the Pac-12 today. It's probably the Pac-10 back then.
That's right.
Did you ever bat against your brother in a game?
Yes, we faced each other twice, and I'm sure these stories are probably going to deviate, but, my side of it is we definitely faced each other the first time. It was at Arizona State. He's leading the country in ERA as a freshman, and we come down there. They were a better team for sure that year, but anyways, he gets me 0-2, which I'll give him, I was taking some pretty healthy hacks, and he, of course, rides one inside and drills me. So probably the biggest.
Oh, my God. Brother on brother hate crime right there.
That's exactly it. People ask me, do you have any regrets in life? I do have one, and it's that I didn't charge the mound. Because, looking back, I had nothing to lose, so I should have just gone after him. So that was a great story. And then the second, the other part about that is we ruined that ERA, which was kind of fun. So we actually chased him in the fourth inning. So there was some payback there, and I didn't get a second time around. He didn't get through the lineup twice before we chased him from that game. But then the following year, they came out to UCLA, kind of had our next opportunity, and the little guy goes 0-0 change up to me. Like I said, I came out of my shoes and unfortunately rolled over and grounded out to the shortstop. But I still give him hell to this day that who starts their brother off with an 0-0 change up.
Hey, no courage to throw one down the middle to see if you could hit it.
That's what I'm saying. Just come at me. But he knew the only thing I could hit was a fastball, so I'll give him kudos for that.
Okay, so now you're with AWM Capital. You guys are financial advisors for pro athletes. Kind of share the financial perspective of what you learned as a player and now as an advisor for athletes. What are some of the things that you provide that set you apart from everyone else in the world?
Yeah, Craig, I mean, I think that's a great question. When we first started off in this business, I think, what we wanted to focus on was giving advice to athletes on the financial side. And what we really quickly learned, and I think we knew intuitively from our days as playing, not necessarily from our own signing bonuses because they weren't very large, but from the teammates we had and the friends that we had, is that the model was broken. And we've got all these series out there, Broke on ESPN, that show the stories that are, really sensationalized. And, what we found is that, yes, there are those cases, but that's not the majority. But the system yet still was broken. And what we quickly figured out and what we've built our company upon is that the expertise is what was missing. So it was a situation where you've got no shortage of former athletes that have come into this financial world. But what they usually lack is they don't develop the expertise to be great and to give the advice that's needed, because it's hard. It's hard to reverse and to really learn this side of the business. And then what you had is you had a bunch of people that have gained the expertise and have the technical side of financial planning and wealth structuring. However, they just don't have the wherewithal to work with the athlete from an understanding standpoint of what they go through, et cetera. So, we really wanted to, yes, come into this industry as previous athletes, but then we wanted to make sure that we had the expertise, and we built a company that has the expertise to properly handle these clients. So, you never meet a salesperson with AWM. Everybody's, really positioned to go get their CFP, which the Certified Financial Planning Designation, or CPA, Certified Public Accountant, CPWA. The laundry list goes on. But the big message is, people are really, our people are experts in what we do. And then more specifically, the expertise in really focusing on that niche. So giving advice, there is unique advice that goes to the athlete, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but we also view wealth quite a bit differently. I think so many people view wealth, or, a lot of financial advisors, which is a bad word in our company, they deal with just the investment portfolio. And at the end of the day, that just doesn't get it done. What we focus more on is the wealth structure, making sure that we're outcomes based, and that what we're doing is helping our clients to achieve, hopefully to maximize their human capital, and then also to make an impact on their families, their communities, and their lives, in the world as a whole.
Okay, so one of the things that
you talked about from the jump is having the expertise, having the know-how, and putting the people in the right positions. But as an agent, one of the things I've noticed is it doesn't matter how smart you are, how wise you are, and how much you can see the future beyond the perspective that the player can even see. If you can't communicate it and make an impact by having them buy into your perspective and your wisdom. So how do you guys in the money business get the players to capture what you can do?
Yeah, that's great question. I think that's where like the art of our business comes in, right? Is yes, you got to have the ability to have the emotional intelligence, to have the relationship skills to help gain the trust of the clients that you're working with. And I think that the way you do that is time, quite frankly, is you spend the time with them. You really take an interest in who they are and what the life that they actually envision for themselves. And I think we're big believers, and I think it's played out this way, is that if you do that, you're going to put a product together for the client, and they're going to trust you and help you, you're going to understand them better so that, when they want to go make the purchase that might not be as wise or make a decision that's not going to be as wise as we know it is, when we tell them no, or we guide them in a way that they don't necessarily like out of the gate, they know it's coming from the right place. And I think that's a huge thing. I think it's a big part of our job. There's a saying that we often refer back to, that our job isn't necessarily to always give you what you want, but it's our job to help you to really want what you need. And if we can develop a level of trust in doing that, then that's going to resonate with you. And I think time's the only way. I mean, this is one of the broken parts of our industry is, a lot of these big firms, these Merrill Lynch's, UBS's, Morgan Stanley's, et cetera. And we started at Morgan Stanley. So I think, it's a big part of our history. We knew this is it's not an effective model, is that, for instance, they want you to have 150 clients per advisor. Like, that just doesn't work, especially for this space. You can't spend that time with your clients. And so, we've been able to fortunately structure our business in a way that we over communicate. I mean, we talk to our clients on average probably every other week. I mean, in our business, that's absolutely unheard of, but it's what's required to put a good product together and a good service for our clients.
No doubt about it. And I think the thing that happens, especially during the season for a professional athlete, is 2 weeks, their career can take a turn to the positive or the negative.
Sure.
If they're a baseball player, they could be in a 2-week slump, and the media could be talking about, hey, they should put him down to AAA.
Yep.
In football, you could have a season-ending injury. You might be put on IR, and your paycheck might be slashed. And so all your budgets and all your planning are off base because you're not even making what you were planning on making.
Sure.
So
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
The dynamics of the situation for professional athletes is such that, like the average Joe might stay at the same job for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 years. The average athlete, LeBron.
Yep.
He's been on Cleveland twice, Miami, LA. He'll probably be done with the Lakers, but that's 4 different stops. And that's not unusual.
No, it's not. I think that's a good point. I mean, this goes back to your earlier point of the other part of that, right, is when your client does have a bad game and you do have maybe a issue that you need to discuss with them, having played the game, you also understand that, hey, the last thing that the guy wants to talk about is his financial situation after he gives up a 4 spot, in the first inning. And so, or he misses a tackle, right, and the guy runs for a touchdown. Rather, I think that's where the playing wisdom comes in. It's like, hey, we're going to audible here. We're not going to address this. We're going to talk about what's your mental space, like how do you get over this? Don't let it affect you. Get back on the horse. That, spend the time around that type of stuff, because that's what's going to ultimately drive their wealth. This is, I think, where we see the world a little bit different than most people is, that conversation is going to be a greater wealth enhancer potentially than, the tax planning topic we were about to go over. because the largest driver for our clients' long-term wealth is the realization of their human capital, them being the best they can be on the field so they earn the most over time. I think that's great. And then, like you said, every 2 weeks, I mean, it's the Mike Tyson quote, right? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. You know, you just got to iterate. And it takes a lot of work, but it's a rewarding client base as well.
Okay, so Brandon, let's talk about how do you help your players and clients the most in the space of human capital in terms of helping them recover from poor performance or expand or improve their current performance so that they set themselves up to be worth more money than they're getting. And one of, you know, in addition to helping them get better returns on investment, you know, more diversification, all the different things that people in your space do, what happens if he's a $20 million performer compared to a $5 million performer? And it's because of the input and impact you've had on that part of it. What does that look like? Describe for our audience and for an athlete that might be listening, how do you do that? How do you make this impact on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'd like to say, and I would hope that our clients would answer this in the same way, is that, you know, first and foremost, we do one of the biggest value add is eliminating the worry, the headache, the anxiety around money. You know, I think it's making sure that they, and to be clear, it's not that they can put their head in the sand and they have no idea what's going on, but give them a lot of confidence that everything we're doing for them on the financial side, the hard dollar side, is being taken care of, and it's done in the best way possible. And I think when you do that and you approach the conversations at the right time of the year, it clears mind space for them on the field. And so I think a great example of this is COVID. COVID's affected everybody pretty significantly, but we were pretty fortunate in the sense that the way we had planned for the majority of our clients, and if they had followed the plan, was that we had enough money set aside that they can weather what we just went through. It wasn't a big deal in March when markets corrected. It wasn't a big deal where it was a big deal long term, but, you know, they didn't have the immediate anxiety when they weren't getting a paycheck for the vast majority of the season this year. And so then when the season started back up, it wasn't this pressure like, oh man, I got to earn all this money now, et cetera. And I think, you know, when you put your client in that kind of position, you give them that free headspace, it impacts their performance for sure. I think still, you know, the same applies for evaluating potential team-friendly deals. If we've planned the right way, we've set them up in the right way, hopefully it gives them confidence to evaluate those deals. And then, you know, maybe it's not taking the bad deal because they have no idea what it actually costs to fund the life that they actually envision. And so, you know, we try to spend a lot of time on that. They have a good understanding of, our clients have a good understanding, what's it going to take to give me the life I really want? And then in combo with the agent, right? Like, what can I go get that deal? Is it realistic? And having those conversations. So I think that's like the hard science side of it. And then I think the other side is just, you know, it is somewhat our past playing days, but then also the relationships we have. You know, fortunately, it extends far beyond just the immediate people in sports. And so, you know, it's connecting them with the right strength coach. It's making sure that the guy we know will resonate, that can go down and train with Erik in Florida, gets down to Erik in Florida, or, you know, Phil Whalen at Diesel Fitness, or, you know, works with Josiah Agano, the peak performance coach, or gets to the right resources to make sure that they're evaluating their game in the right way. And so, you know, there's a lot of I would call the soft skills around that stuff that we do focus on and talk about. We sent out Trevor Moad's recent book to, you know, all of our big league clients. You know, it's just taking an approach that's a little bit different, I think, from a conversation standpoint. So that's probably a more fluffy answer on the backside, but it is something that we include in all our conversations.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's jump to your personal life. You know, you're married, you've got 2 kids, young kids, and you've got one on the way. Share with everyone, how'd you meet your bride?
Yeah, so that's a decent story. We the origin is kind of, it ties into the formation of AWM with Erik. I was living in the Bay Area at the time. Erik what I argue has made his best sale ever to convince me to leave the banking industry and working with wineries, because wine is a big passion of mine, to join him in the Arizona heat and start this venture. And it just so happened I was driving from the Bay Area, down to Arizona. I stopped at a UCLA game. I saw one of my ex-teammates, and, we were talking and everything, and his dad was there, and his dad didn't mention much, but obviously I knew my ex-teammate Will Peniel. And what I didn't know is that his dad, Dave Peniel, actually owned a financial company in Southern California. And so as I kind of went upon my way, went down to Arizona to join Erik, we worked for about 6 months. To kind of cut to the chase, decided, figured out really quickly that Morgan Stanley is not the model. It's just not the place to give advice to athletes. Very fortunately and fortuitously, Dave Peniel, Will's dad, called us out of the blue and said, "Hey, we had that conversation. I've always wanted to have a division that focused on athletes, and I've been watching you guys, and you're nuts. You're flying all over the country. You're doing this the right way. Will you come talk with me?" And 5 days later, we struck an agreement, and we went to work to build the athlete division under his firm. Well, just so happens I walk in the first day and sit down, and I look across, and there's this woman that's sitting across from me in the other cubicle. It's her first day as well, and lo and behold, it's Will's sister. And about a year later, we started dating. And I think it was 2 years after that we were married, and now we got the 2 kids and a third on the way. So it definitely a tangled web of sorts. And I think just to finish the story, kind of stayed a part of that firm for 7 years, and then it ultimately spun out into what AWM Capital is today, as an independent advisory firm.
Well, that sounds awesome. Is she a better athlete or no?
She's definitely a better athlete. She's definitely smarter. So that CFA designation I referred to, the Chartered Financial Analyst earlier, she's a CFA. So anybody that knows that designation, it's probably one of the hardest designations in the world, and certainly in the investment field to get. 3-year process. Anyways, I could brag on that for a while, but she's smarter, better looking, and better athlete. So I definitely outkicked my coverage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to your playing days when you had that competitive mindset of, training, believing, trying to beat the competition, trying to go to the next level. Even if you're in the pros, you're trying to go to the next level. If you're in AAA, you're trying to get to the bigs. If you're in the bigs, you're trying to get paid. If you're getting paid, you're trying to go to the Hall of Fame. Everybody aspires to get to that next level.
Sure.
What was kind of your mindset during the course of your career that you attribute to your success? I mean, what was the mindset that you had that worked? What was the mind, did it develop? Was it just something you were born with, something you got from your pops? What was your secret sauce for you to play? I mean, not too many people can play baseball at UCLA and then have an opportunity to go to the minors. What was yours?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's kind of been illuminated now as I've had kids, especially my son Luke, to see and just to hear people's reaction to his intensity. I knew I was somewhat intense, but apparently it's very similar, and it's pretty amazing to see from the outside. So I would say it's probably my edge on that side was my intensity, good and bad. And then probably the grit I had and the work ethic I had. I was definitely not the most talented. There's no doubt about that. But, I think I just wanted it. And so I was willing to do some of the things probably that other people don't always want to do. And good for them. A lot of them get away with being more talented, not having to do that. But, I think, I was giving this advice to a player that's wanting to get in our industry. I think the other part of it is just like being a self-starter. This was the part that all the intensity and the work ethic was probably innate or learned from my parents. But, I think that the other part of it is just being a self-starter and knowing that nobody was going to do it necessarily for me. I wasn't good enough to have the agent that was going to set up my off-season workouts or any of that kind of stuff. I had to go find my own deal and, just make sure that I was getting the reps in and doing those different things, right? that's what comes to mind. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's what comes to mind.
Give an example, Brandon, of something that you did that you knew you had to do to compete with your peers or to be one of the best on your team that maybe some of the other guys didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the good examples are just some of the small things that probably don't even seem that special, but, you know, I just lived in a batting cage. You know, I just spent a lot of time working on my craft. And then, you know, there were other things like, you know, in pro ball, like I mentioned, I didn't get a big signing bonus. So, you know, not like, unlike a lot of guys, I'd have to work in the off season. So it'd be get up early, go work a job, and then still get your workouts in right after you're tired and all that kind of stuff. So just showing up, I think, really, and giving that effort to that side of things, it's pretty easy, right, to let those moments get away. I think that was it, really, just being dedicated to make sure that, hey, no matter what's going on, you know, make sure you get your work in and make sure you're working on your craft. That's what I was always trying to focus on.
Okay, during the course of your career, what was the gutter experience? What was the time when you wanted to quit and you had to dig deeper to persevere, whether it was in high school, college, or in the minors? Share for our audience that situation where you overcame adversity and continued your career.
Yeah, I mean, there's one specific, and I wouldn't even say it's a great outcome necessarily. There's one specific memory I have, and it was actually my second year of pro ball. It was right after kind of the spring training phase. It was like the last day, and I was just done. I just didn't want to play anymore. I had personal stuff going on in my life, and I was done. I actually went to the manager and said, hey, I'm going home. You know, I was hitting third for the team. Like, you know, there's no big reason why to do it. I actually just went home that night, and I just had in my gut it wasn't the right call, that I couldn't just go out that way. I went back to the manager, explained kind of what I was going through, and said, hey, I still want to be here. And fortunately, you know, they still had a spot for me on the team. And it was my last year of pro ball, and I can't imagine if I didn't play that year how my life would have turned out differently, or, you know, the friends I wouldn't have and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, that definitely sticks out very significantly. And there's nothing I did about it. It was just more kind of a reflection and getting over that mind space to say, you know what, I gotta stick around and play this out and give it this one last shot.
Okay, Brandon, so let's talk about that. Every player that's ever played any sports, whether it's high school, college, or pro, it seems like it's a hard landing when they're done. Very few guys get this floating soft landing. And yeah, Michael Jordan and a few guys like that. LeBron's going to get to decide when he retires, those type of things. But for most guys, it's a hard landing. I mean, it's a get punched in the face moment. But you had a moment before that where you quit a little bit in your own mind, and then you communicated that to your manager.
Yep.
So just this last week, I've had one college athlete and one pro athlete that have said they're sick of it and they're ready to quit. What would you tell a guy in that situation?
Make sure you're right. I mean, I think this is where I got to was, you know, I was letting other things dictate that decision, and the adversity and, you know, the other stuff that I was facing kind of dictate that decision. And that was incongruent with how I had always been my entire life and who I was. And I think that's why it was so unsettling. So, you know, I give this advice to players all the time, even when it's pretty clear. And it was clear at that time I was not going to be a big leaguer, but you better have it out of your system. Now, I don't think you need to be irresponsible and continue, like, if it's clear and you're in a mental space where it's like, hey, I'm ready to move on with my life and it's for the right reasons, you know, I get that. I totally get it. And I came to that decision after the end of that season. But if you're doing it for any other reasons, then, hey, I've got something else I want to pursue, or, you know, that your life is ready to move on. Even if it's a 1% deal, I always recommend, I mean, you got to exhaust this moment and exhaust this opportunity, because if you don't, I think it's not the old saying of, hey, when you're 50, you look back, you're going to regret it. It's just like, I'm a firm believer that it's going to impact the overall trajectory of your life, and how you deal with that situation is going to impact how you deal with other major situations in your life. So I don't know, it's probably not very specific, but I certainly wouldn't rush to judgment. And if it has to do with anything outside of yourself and what your true north is, then you better think very, very hard about actually moving forward in that decision.
Well, here's the thing that's a little bit ironic and funny is sometimes when guys are in the big leagues or in the pros, they really don't like where they're at. They're not comfortable in their own skin. They're not comfortable in their situation. They feel like they're getting wronged. They feel like someone else is getting more playtime or more accolades, and they're better than that person. They're a harder worker than that person. And in some respects, they may even outperform that person. And yet there are millions and millions and millions, and I'll just talk about young men, that would give a body part to play one game in the bigs.
Yeah.
That is a crazy, that's two ends of the spectrum. You're there and you're like sick of it. And all those guys that are never got a taste of it just want to play in one World Series game. They could just play in one play in a Super Bowl. How much money would they pay if they'd actually allow them to do it?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
So describe for me what the mental dynamics are of those two opposing situations.
I think it's really it's self-awareness. I think when I ultimately did make the decision to walk away, it's not like I had some passion for what I was going to do. Frankly, I didn't have any clue what I was going to do. But I think what I got to was like, hey, I'm not built. God didn't make me to be a big leaguer, and I'm okay with that. I got to the point where I believed that, God had a different path for me, and a belief that I was going to have a bigger impact on this world doing something other than playing baseball. That's what gave me the confidence to know that that was the right decision. It wasn't my dad wanting me to play another season, or, my girlfriend wanting me to not play, or, my friends, having that deal, like I'd give anything to have a season of pro ball. All of that didn't matter, right? And I think that's it. It's the self-awareness to understand, like, what are you innately meant to do? And only you can answer that, I think, with self-reflection, and certainly with help by the advisors that you have around you, and input and all that kind of stuff. But you got to get a comfort level with that decision. And if you can do that, then you can walk away. There's also a lot of situations, right, where the game's just taken from you. You got to move on and figure that out as well. But if you're weighing, like, hey, do I walk away in the midst of this adversity? You better make sure, in my mind at least, that it's not the adversity that's making you walk away. It's because you know that your life and what you're built to do is something different.
That's a great perspective. Okay, Brandon, let's look at the guy you played with, the guys that you work with, the guys that you're familiar with that have had uber success in the big leagues or in the NFL, in professional sports, and compare them to the guys that everybody thought would, that didn't. And what would you say the defining factors are between those two groups of guys?
The coconut, the mind. There's no other answer in my view. Right, talent's one thing, and you got to have the talent to get there and be good. But at the end of the day, it's what's between the ears. My favorite example is Josh Tomlin, with the Atlanta Braves now. Anybody that knows Josh or has seen his career, the guy throws 88 miles an hour. On his best, he can hump up to 90. There is nobody with a bigger set of gonads than Josh Tomlin, and he's been able to put together a 10-year career in the big leagues because of it. He rises up in big games. Like he's just the epitome of success to me, right? And I think through the other people, Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard, like these guys that are at the elite levels, they all have one thing in common. And it's just a different mindset. They show up and they expect to be good. Erik tells a story, and I wonder if he told us when he was talking to you, if this question came up of, Dustin Pedroia. Every time that guy got out, he'd come back in the dugout and he was genuinely surprised. He just could not fathom how in the world that guy got him out. And I just think, like, it's that mindset that's the elite. right? That's the elite mindset to me is, you know, it's somebody that has such a self-belief and that just, you know, has that competitive streak. I think to truly be great at things, like you got to have that. You got to have grit. You got to overcome adversity. I mean, we know this. This is, I don't think, any secret. If you get knocked down, the people that get back up and get back out there are the ones that are going to be successful over time. So when I think of like teammates and, you know, people that we know and clients we work with that are going to be great, it's those people. I mean, on the flip side, I can't count the number of times it's like, man, you throw 100 miles an hour and I mean, you're not going to make it. You just don't have what it takes. I mean, and it always plays out that way. I mean, there's very few guys that don't have that kind of mindset that get there and are great in my view, or I've seen very few examples of it.
So is it fair to say that talent will get you there, but it won't keep you there and it won't make you a Hall of Famer? And belief and some of these intangible things are really the difference makers for separating the elite from the rest. 100%.
I think that's a very accurate statement in my mind. You got to have the talent to get there, but you're not going to stick around or be elite if you can't figure out the mental side of the game and your approach to it. Doesn't mean it has to be the same as everybody else's. I mean, all those guys I just mentioned are very different people, very different ways about going about it, but they all have that mental edge. So I think you're spot on.
Well, one of the things I've seen over 30 years on the football side is if you don't have belief, none of the other stuff matters.
Mm-hmm.
Belief bleeds into confidence in your skills. It bleeds into your identity of who you are. And so when you were describing Justin being surprised about getting grounding out or striking out or whatever the case may be, his belief had to be so high that he expected something way different. If he would have ever accepted that guy's better than me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the other part about this is not to mislead people. I mean, that's hard, right? It's hard to believe that way. It's hard to train your mind to do all this. So it kind of goes back, but you got to work on it, you know, equally. There are just as few people that are born that way. So, you know, we have clients all the time that struggle. I mean, I just sent 2 books to a guy that's working on this. Like he's intentionally using this time in the off season to start to focus on developing this piece. So, you know, I'm a big believer it's learned. It's not just innate. So I think that's also why it can be so powerful.
I think it's definitely learned, but I do believe that God blesses a few athletes with just crazy belief.
Yeah.
And the coaches they have, their teammates, think they're naive, think they're like they can't see things, you know, objectively. But I feel like it's a self-fulfilling thing. If a young man, let's go back to 10 years old, if the guy thinks he's the dude, usually he ends up being the dude because you can't perform outside of your identity. You always perform consistent with your identity. So if your identity is you're a badass, your identity is you're the best, your identity is you're going to go to the league and you're 10 years old. That's the guy that's writing the letter about on career day to his teacher saying, I'm going to play in the pros. And that's also right. And that's also the guy that the teacher's saying, hey, can you redo your paper and, you know, pick something realistic? And he doesn't.
I hope you're right, because I was actually teaching the opposite of that lesson. A couple of days ago, I had my little guy out at the baseball field, and he was popping some good ones, and a woman came up and told him how, you know, hey, you've got a really good swing and blah, blah, blah. And his response was, yeah, I know, and, you know, I'm also really good at golf. And I was like, look, buddy, that's not what you say in those situations. So I hope you're right. I hope it is that confidence that pays off.
No, I believe it is. And talent has a say in it. So, like, even for your son, who you said was 3.5, if he has the talent, then his mind is going to be his limiting factor.
Right.
Or his propelling factor.
Sure. That makes sense.
You got to let God's impression on his heart and on his mind be whatever it's going to be. And be careful. Don't tone that down. That's a blessing. That's a gift.
Sure.
And
yeah.
Because most people Get in high school. Oh, he throws 92 and I throw 82. Oh, he's going to make it. That's most people.
Sure.
But you described a couple guys that were not most people, and they're in the league, yet they don't have the most arm talent.
Absolutely.
So what I've learned, and I've seen it over and over again, are these patterns of behavior that are consistent with the player's identity. And if a player truly, genuinely, to his core believes he has to work hard, he has to make sacrifices, he has to get his sleep, he has to eat right, or he's a fraud. He has to recover from a bad game, or he's a fraud. And the guys that can consistently do that, they make it.
Yeah.
And the guys that change their identity and stop believing because, oh, yeah, I didn't get a scholarship, or, oh, I didn't become, I wasn't the ace of the staff, or whatever it may be.
Right.
And they try to change their identity to be consistent with their circumstances, they don't make it. I mean, Tom Brady was seventh string when he showed up at Michigan.
Right.
So he had a choice when he was a dumb freshman in college. Oh, I guess maybe I should play another position or start getting my resume together because I'm probably not going to be in the NFL. And he could have did the same thing on draft day when he was the 199th guy taken. But
Sure.
He didn't. First time he met the owner, he basically told Robert Kraft, hey, dude, you made a mistake. You're going to regret not taking me earlier. Who in the heck's got the balls to say that?
Right.
So he was gifted with an immense amount of belief that his parents and friends did not crush that allowed him to rise to potentially the best of all time, and he's playing tonight the best of all time.
Sure.
And you got to admit, when you look at his pictures from the combine, he looked like a geek. He didn't look like an athlete.
Yep.
I feel like you're either blessed with that belief, and it's a gift, or you've got to develop it. And without it, regardless of how you get it, you won't make it. I don't care.
I agree.
I don't care if your other gifts are so sexy, like you run a 4.4, or you're 6'4" and 220, and you run like the wind, whatever it is.
Yep.
You can throw the ball 100 miles an hour. Those are gifts too. But if you don't have the mind to go with it, you're just going to be a guy that everybody thought would that never did.
No question. Zach Miller brought up the story, I'm sure, or he'll tell the story of Jamarcus Russell versus Russell Wilson. It's the difference there, right? It's the mindset.
It is the mindset. And Russell Wilson, he did all the right things, but because he believed in himself so much, he just won fans from his coaches and his teammates and his peers. And then he ends up going to the NFL, not as a first rounder because he didn't have the measurables they were looking for, but he had the work ethic and all the other things that they were looking for. Now he might be, arguably one of the top three quarterbacks in the league today, and he's won a Super Bowl. And Jamarcus Russell was a miserable bust, but he had all the tools, had all the size, had all the everything.
Yep.
Brandon, whether the people listening are an athlete or not, for those that are going through a space right now in their life today, where they're having financial problems, they're having marital problems, they're having relationship problems, they're having career problems, they're having something going on, and they need to get out of it. What is like your recipe in your life and recommendations you make to your clients to help guys like get off the mat and get that mojo back?
Hopefully you've built relationships with people that can speak wisdom into your life, whether that's from a spiritual sense or a money sense or a coaching sense. Hopefully you have some people that can help you sort through that situation. I guess that would be my advice, is to work with those people and find out, is there a path to a solution, hopefully preserving the relationship you're in or not changing a career or whatever it might be. But frankly, maybe it does require a change. So I think really working with the advisors or the mentors or the people that you have around you. And then, secondarily, I think a lot of self-reflection. I think this is something we're just not good at in general as a society. And unfortunately, a lot of people have to turn to it when they're going through that crisis situation. Hopefully you can do some of the work before you get there. But that's what worked for me when I've gone through some tough times in life is really a lot of self-reflection, spending time in space where you can think and sort your thoughts out and rely upon the wisdom of those people that are around you.
Okay, Brandon, I want to thank you for being on the show today. I want to thank you for your perspective and, sharing some information about your family, your brotherly competition, your passion for your financial career.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I think, I love this whole topic. I think like the work that you do, helping guys and women to find that mindset, that pro mindset is so critical that, whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, a founder, a CEO, whatever you're going through in life. I mean, it's just such a great topic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.